It's time for another weekly reading update, and I have read some great ones. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel. Today I just wanted to talk about what I've been reading over the past week and all the wonderful things I've been reading for, especially Victober. If you follow my channel, you know that I love Victober, and so this month that is my priority, to read Victorian literature, and I'm reading some wonderful things. But I also noticed that over the past couple of years, by the third week or so in October, I'm sort of burning out on my Victorian literature. So this year I decided to do things differently, and I think this is the way to go for me. I start out reading the Victorian literature, and then I add some things in between that are not Victorian, that are just fluffy reads, as I call them. And it kind of just breaks it up a little bit for me, because I find that some of the Victorian literature I read is a little more dense and it's, you know, requires a little bit more out of me. So I do like to, you know, have a little bit of a flexibility there, and I like to mood read anyway. So, you know, I make these TBRs every month and all these goals, but I do like to have some flexibility, and I think that this is how I should go about all my readathons. Okay, so I said all that to say it was a wonderful week of reading, and my Victober is going wonderfully. The first thing I want to talk about is The Mayor of Casterbridge by Thomas Hardy. I'm not sure if everyone's finished with this or not. I think there's a few more days of this group read. This is the group read for Victober, but I couldn't stop reading, so I kept going. And it's not very long, so when I had a chance, I just kept reading. This is my first Thomas Hardy, and I must say I was pleasantly surprised, because I've heard just scary things about Thomas Hardy. I heard that he just rips your heart out and makes you cry. So I have avoided Thomas Hardy because of that. But I must say I love his writing. I love the way that this story was told. The setting, he did a great job with the setting. Now this is shorter, and I'm not sure if all of his books are this length or not, because it was super fast paced for me. This was a page turner, and again, it didn't take long to read this one. But immediately I was drawn into the story and cared about it, because in the very beginning of this story, there is this man who has a drinking problem, and he gets drunk and he sells his wife and child. So after that, it's basically about suffering the consequences of that. Later on, many years later, he is now the mayor of Casterbridge, and that's why it's called this. And I don't want to say too much more, because it isn't that long, but there are a lot of characters in here. They're in the beginning, and then they show up again, and then some people from this guy's past keep showing up and interfering in his life. And it's about how he responds to all of these people and what's going on around him. And that's all I'll say about it, because, again, it's not very long and I don't want to spoil anything. I found this, though, a page turner. It was fast paced and I enjoyed it. I found the setting to be wonderful. I mean, you feel like you are in the middle of this and you are involved in these people's lives. So I love the character development. I love the setting. But I will say, halfway through this, I started feeling just sad. And so I don't think this is the saddest book he has, but it's just the way that there's this certain character in the story that's just a train wreck. And it's like when there's a train wreck and you just can't stop watching, you know you need to turn away, but you can't stop. That's how I felt reading through this. It's like, please make a good decision. And as he's responding to things around him, he makes just mistake one after another, and he has to suffer those consequences for these mistakes he makes. And I had to take a break at one point. I was like, okay, for the next couple of days I can't read this, because I would read this at night before bed, and that was the wrong time to read these certain sections, because it was just heartbreaking. It was just such a heartbreaking thing to read about someone making these mistakes, and they just can't seem to get it right. And so I found that to be heartbreaking. But again, the way Thomas Hardy conveys the story, you are deeply involved and you must keep reading. I will say there is at the closer to the end of this, and I'm not going to say what, but there is this goldfinch, this bird that blew me away. The way he used this bird in this story absolutely blew me away. And maybe not you if you've read it, but for me, that bird signified everything that Thomas Hardy was trying to say in the story. And I loved that part of this book. It was a great read. I loved it. It was heartbreaking, but I do love Thomas Hardy's writing, and I am interested in reading more. So let me know where I should go next. I've heard that there are certain books that are really heartbreaking, and so I'm a little afraid of those, but I do want to read more Thomas Hardy. So this was a great read. And then I read another Mr. Putter and Tabby, and this one's called Mr. Putter and Tabby Catch the Cold. And these are written by Cynthia Rowlett, and they're illustrated by Arthur Howard, and they are just a delight to read. So I can't remember who told me about these, but thank you, because I picked up another one from my library. In this one, Mr. Putter catches a cold, and it's cute because at the beginning it's wintertime, and he wants to read the funnies in his paper, so he goes out to get his paper from the box, and when he does, he forgets his hat. And it's so cute because when he comes back in, Tabby the cat, it says Tabby sat on Mr. Putter's head to keep it warm while he read the funnies. She tried to help him not catch a cold. She did her best. And in the picture, if you look, you see her sitting on top of his head. Is that not the most precious thing you've ever seen? So the story goes on about him catching cold and how he's older, and it's just no fun when you're older catching a cold. And he thinks about, as a child, when he had a cold, his mom would bring him chicken soup and adventure stories, and so some things happened to help him recover from his cold as an older person. It is just, I am loving these books. It's just a delight to read these. So I have another one that I've checked out, and I'll be reading that one this week. So these are so cute, and it was a great way to just kind of break up the reading that I was doing. And by the way, I don't know if I mentioned this. I think I've already talked about The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, that I'd finished these. I don't know if I had said I was just enjoying these or I actually finished, but I did in fact finish these, and now I am watching the Jeremy Brett Sherlock Holmes TV adaptations. And I'm just watching the ones that go with this. My son said I needed to read the memoirs first and then go watch, but I'm not doing that. I'm doing it the way I want to. And I just wanted to mention that there was another one that I loved in this short story collection, and that was The Copper Beeches. And when I watched the episode, it was great. The episode for that one is really, really a good one. So if you read The Copper Beeches from The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, this is a collection of short stories. If you read that one, then go find the episode, the Jeremy Brett episode of The Copper Beeches. It's my favorite so far. I will say I loved The Man with the Twisted Lip, was one of my favorite short stories in here, but I didn't like the way they did that episode. I enjoyed the episode, but it's harder to do that one in a drama, in a TV form. When you're reading, it's a little different than when you watch it. So that's probably why. So make sure to read The Man with the Twisted Lip before you watch that episode. Anyway, I don't know if I had talked about that or not, but I have finished that. And then I read Lady Audley's Secret by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. This was fantastic. This was a 5-star read. I absolutely loved it. I buddy read this with Marilyn, Gemma, and Nikki, and I will leave all of their booktube channels below because they are booktubers. We had a wonderful time reading through this. Thank you, ladies, for reading this with me, because that made it even better. I loved hearing all of their comments along the way, and it helps you, when you buddy read a book, it helps you look at things from a different perspective. Sometimes we go at it a certain way, and then when someone points something out, you start noticing other things. So if you ever have a chance to buddy read, it's a wonderful way to experience a book in a different way. But this book again, was fantastic. I had read The Woman in White, and then I read this one, and I thought The Woman in White was going to be better, but I don't know. I think I like Mary Elizabeth Braddon's writing better than Wilkie Collins. I was so impressed with her writing. In this book, everything is balanced. I think Gemma was the one that mentioned that in our group as we were reading, how her setting, her pacing, her character development, and the plot itself are all well balanced through the story, and I found that wonderful. A lot of times these books, the setting, you can get bogged down in their description, but not with this one. Her setting is wonderful. I know I'm going to say wonderful and fantastic over and over, but this book was crazy. In the beginning, you know that Lady Audley does have a secret. You find out pretty early on what the secret is. But there is tension after that of how it's going to be revealed. So I'm not spoiling anything by saying that. So don't go in thinking there's a mystery about her secret, because you pretty much know her secret from the beginning. It's not really a sensation novel for that reason. The sensation part of it is more, is she going to get away with it, and what's going to happen when they do discover her secret. So if you go in with that, I think you will enjoy it more. Because if you think that it's the secret and it's revealed, then you don't want to read. No, there's a whole lot more to it. But I love the characters in this. I don't want to say too much again, because there's a lot of surprises in this. I'm trying not to say too much. But again, her writing is fantastic, and I do want to read more. It was funny, after we finished, Gemma was like, okay, I have downloaded her whole collection of books. Well, she's written like 80, 90 books. So Nikki was like, okay, we're going to be reading those till we're 80 years old, but we're going to do it. We've already decided we're going to read another one next Victober, and we're going to keep reading Mary Elizabeth Braddon. She is wonderful at sensation novels. There are so many things in here that were symbolic of the times and our responses. And I also like the way that she kind of flipped some things with the way the male characters were, as opposed to how the female characters are in most of the Victorian books. And if you've read this, you probably know what I'm talking about. So I love this, and I do plan on reading more by Mary Elizabeth Braddon. And then, again, to change it up and read something different, I read a fluff read, and that was The Ghost and Mrs Jeffries by Emily Brightwell. This is the third in the Mrs. Jeffries, the Inspector and Mrs. Jeffries series, and I am really enjoying these little books. Again, they're just lighthearted, fun mysteries. They're set in the Victorian period, though, so that's why I decided to read the next one during Victober, and it was just so much fun. And I will say, I like the plot of this one better than the other two I've already read. They're not complicated, and they're easy reads, but in this one, it starts out, this lady goes to this seance. You know, seances were pretty popular during Victorian period. So she goes to this seance, and she's told that she's about to experience doom and gloom all around her. Well, that night, she is murdered. And so definitely doom and gloom was all around her because she's murdered. And then it goes on from there. What I liked about this one was, again, the characters are wonderful. I love this household. I love all the characters that are in this series. But I like this one because there are a lot of suspects, and they are all legitimately great suspects. You think every one of them has cause to murder this woman who is not a very nice person. No one likes her, of course. And the way that it's told, the way that it's revealed, was a fun way to figure out the murder. As you're going, you are learning along with Mrs. Jeffries. So bit by bit, as she has these conversations, she kind of talks out what she's learning along the way. And I just like that about it. I thought it was a fun way to kind of, okay, these are the clues. This is what I've learned. It was just a fun way to solve the case in this one. And I really like the plot and the way that the seance was used. There's not much about, it says the ghost of Mrs. Jeffries. There's not a ghost in this. And the seance was just a fun element to add because there is a reason that's included, but it's you know, a backdrop. It was just a fun way to tell the story. So I did like this one, and so far I think this is my favorite one in the series, so I will be picking up more of the Inspector and Mrs. Jeffries. So those are the things I've been reading this week. I've had a great week of reading. I enjoyed all the books that I read this week. I do think that I need to add a few other things like these fluffy kind of reads, easy reads throughout. So like having some short stories in there. I'm reading through Among the Shadows by Ellen Montgomery for the More Montgomery Challenge. And that's kind of helping kind of break up the Victorian literature that I'm reading. So it's working for me. I think that I will continue doing that throughout the rest of Victober. What are you reading? Let me know in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.